reconvene in open session. And item 6 is public comment period. I'm assuming we don't have anybody signed up. Okay. So we'll go to item 7, update and report by the Director of Electric Utilities or his designee regarding customer service, business center practices, procedures and policies, billing procedures, and LP&L staffing and performance. Mr. Burcham.
All right, just for the public to know, David McCullough is in Austin today meeting with the regional planning group at ERCOT, and so he's working on the ERCOT integration down there today, and so I'm filling in for today on the director's report. And I pulled one of my slides from my financial presentation up into this one just because part of the director's report does include an analysis on rates. And really this slide is no different from the one you saw last month. We have not gotten an update from Xcel Energy at this point in the month for their November rates. But you can see in October we were about $1.30 more expensive than the similar customer in Amarillo using 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy. So that's no change from last month. What I did want to point out, since we do have comparisons with some of the other utilities across the state, we are below the state average. State average is about $102, so about 2% below that. We're below San Antonio, the CPS Energy, about 3% below them. They're at 104. El Paso's at $113, so we're about 11% below them. And we're about flat with Austin Energy. So we're still on the low end of most of the municipal utilities across the state. Wanted to provide you with a few highlights. These are included in your agenda packet on page 14 as the customer service highlights, and just a couple I wanted to point out. Call volume in the call center in November was pretty consistent with what we saw in October, but a little bit difference in this month. We had quite a few questions about the refunds of the customer deposits that we talked about a couple of months ago. On the very beginning of the month, we did set in motion those refunds. We did provide $1,561,000 of refunds to 10,311 accounts. And going forward, on the first Sunday of every month in the system, we will trigger that month's refunds for those customers who are eligible going forward. So it'll be small amounts each month going forward, but it will be on a recurring basis as the board approved. The average wait time dropped to under 1 minute with the call center. That's the lowest wait time we've had really since the data that I have over the last 4 years. Also, the call handling time dropped to 4 minutes, which is one of the lowest levels we've had since we began tracking that metric. We did hire 10 new call service representatives at the beginning of November. Or I think at the beginning of October, but they're beginning to get used to that, and so that's helped. We also have a really outstanding, relatively new call center supervisor, Camille Powell, who's done an incredible job at morale building and really building a good team environment in that department. So I think that is reflected in some of the metrics coming out of there. In the distribution section, you'll see that information on page 17 of your agenda book. We did have an outage. It was Black Friday. The early morning, it was related to the deadly car accident. It did affect about 8,000 of our customers. Some statistics to note out of that, we got just shortly under 2,000 calls that were processed in the distribution by distribution staff, and then just under 2,000 emails that went to our lights out at lpnl.com email address. So that was effective as well. So about 4,000 contacts. Some of those may be duplicative, but you can see what kind of activity occurs in an outage like that. And the last several bullets are related to our production department. You see that information on page 18. Did want to point out that Brandon and Massengale stations were available during the month, but were not dispatched due to the cooler temperatures. Those were not needed in the SPP integrated marketplace. The units at Cook Station, all but one, are down with equipment issues. So the steam unit was dispatched, but only 3 times, again, just because of the cooler temperatures and the lack of need by Xcel for that energy. Our peak load did occur on November 27th due to, I think that was also Black Friday, the strong cold front that came through. We'd been 72 the day before. The high the next day was 35, so the dramatic change in weather created a peak load on our system for that month. Those are kind of the highlights.
Mr. Osmond.
Yes.
Steve may be the answer to this, but that rec happened. We had 8,000 outages. What was the damage and how long it takes to get fixed?
So the vehicle hit that steel pole, which knocked all the mounting brackets off the pole.
Okay.
So it was a transmission line, so it did lock out our main feed.
Right.
And the rest of the time it took us to switch around to where we could get all the customers back on.
Is that a long period of time? Oh,
I can't.
You didn't have to replace the pole, though, did you?
We didn't have to replace the pole. I'm trying to remember, I think it was about 90 minutes before we got everybody back.
Correct me if I'm wrong, when in that incident, you couldn't repair that pole. You had to route around it because you didn't have access at that point because of the investigation and all that related to the wreck. So they have to route around.
When there's a
And then
fatality,
they
it
can come
takes
back
a
later and
long
repair it.
time. It takes a long time for them to have access to the area.
thanks, Steve.
So that kind of provides some highlights for the month. I have only one other slide, I believe, that I just wanted to give y'all an update on the Farcut Integration. I know that that's there hasn't been a lot of public discussion about that since a couple months ago, but I wanted to update you what we've done this last month, at least since the last board meeting. One thing I wanted to point out first is there's a group at ERCOT called the Regional Planning Group, and this is a group where David McCall is in attendance today at their meeting. They meet on a monthly basis, and I just wanted to give everybody kind of a backdrop of what that group does, since a lot of the terminology and a lot of the information related to ERCOT is relatively new to us. You can see that the purpose of the Regional Planning Group is really for discussion and input on issues related to the planning the ERCOT system. It provides members and stakeholders to have input in those processes. So there's a large amount of groups that can be members of that and can attend. It can be transmission and distribution owners, it can be generators, it can be marketers, it can be consumer groups, it can be environmental groups, landowners, the PUC staff in this attendance. So it's a very varied group of individuals that all have an interest on the system of ERCOT. And so today, and this next slide kind of gives you a recap. Well, actually, let me go back to a couple days after the last board meeting. We traveled to Austin to meet with the Regional Planning Group and make a presentation to them on the integration plan as we see it going forward. David McCall gave an overview of the process, and then PWR Solutions, which is our consultant engineer that's been hired for this process, gave the majority of the presentation. That was followed up by, we presented a 120-page report to the Regional Planning Group as part of that to provide them with the information on all of our analysis on the best methods to integrate LP&L into ERCOT. There is a stakeholder comment period that will begin at that time and will end on Christmas Day, so there'll be some comment period where folks can respond to ERCOT based on our plan that was presented. On December the 7th, ERCOT filed a letter at the PUC to seek guidance on our integration process. When the PUC authorized ERCOT and directed them to study the integration back in September, they basically just told them to study it. There was no really protocols or rules that were presented, and ERCOT has been looking for a little bit more guidance from the PUC because we're relatively unique. This has not been done to this magnitude in the past, and so they have submitted a letter. The PUC will take this up on a meeting this Thursday to give ERCOT a little bit better direction on whether it will be, whether ERCOT will just basically do a study and then turn it over to the PUC, or whether ERCOT will do a study, go through a stakeholder process, bring in lots of different folks to kind of vet that. So they're looking at both of those different directions. We also followed up with a response to that letter that ERCOT presented to the PUC, not in opposition by any stretch, but just to kind of augment the letter that ERCOT had presented to kind of give them a better feel of our preference. And our preference is to go through the full stakeholder process, to have this fully vetted with all the stakeholders, have all the inputs of all bodies, to make sure that this is, once we get to the PUC, that they're comfortable that every different thing has been looked at related to the integration. December 15th today was the meeting where ERCOT was discussing the scope of the study that they're going to be implementing in response basically to our study on the integration process. And so they met with all the stakeholders today to get any input on how they are going to be handling that assessment of the integration. And then, like I said a moment ago, on December 17th, this Thursday, the PUC will have that meeting to discuss and provide that guidance to ERCOT, hopefully, on the process. And then going forward, January, February timeframe, ERCOT will be conducting the reliability analysis and the evaluation of all those integration options, looking at the ones we provided, looking at their own as an independent body. And then in the March to April timeframe, ERCOT will be conducting what is called an economic analysis and doing sensitivity studies on different alternatives related to our integration. And then finally in May, they are proposing that they will have their studies complete. And at that point, we'll be presenting it to the Public Utility Commission, and that process will begin the process to identify the transmission builder, lines to be built to transmission and things like that. So that's just a quick update of what's happened. There's been almost daily meetings, daily activity related to the integration, very active at this point in time. But I do think for the next couple of months it'll be relatively quiet as ERCOT digs into the details and does their studies, and really won't hear a lot more out of the regulatory side of things until the April to May timeframe. So kind of gives you a brief update on all that. Any questions?
Questions from Mr. Burgess? Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
That brings us to item 8. Discuss financial and capital statements, financing options, audit, and financial policies of Logan Power and Light relating to debt issuance issues, reserve account funding, cost allocation, and revenue and expense projections of Logan Power and Light. Chair.
Sir, Board, Council, thank you for the opportunity to present. So this is a brief update on the financials. Per the tariff, we're required to give you guys an update on the pass-through each month, and we're actually in the same place that we were a month ago. Due to some timing issues, this is the earliest possible time that we could have this meeting. Fell a little early in the month, and then Tech and LISD were closed part of the time when we were trying to get some of the reads. We don't have the information to collect or to calculate the over collection through November. We'll have that in the next few days, so we'll have that for you at the next meeting. But this is the same slide that you saw last month. But what I wanted to do today was give you a brief overview of our capital program and where it's been and kind of where it's heading. As you know, we're in the middle of our annual financial audit. Should be done first part of February, and that's when we typically present financials in the board book. So you've got some financial reports in there, but you don't have your balance sheet and income statement. So today I just wanted to focus on the capital program and kind of let you know. I wanted to start with where we've been. Over the last couple of years, we've closed over 60 capital projects, 25 of those in 13, 14, 20 last fiscal year, and so far this fiscal year we've closed, that number is actually updated today, we've closed 18 projects with 2 more pending open commitments. So, and then just the value of those projects that we've closed, we've put about 36.8, 36.9 million in capital assets on the books. So what does our current capital program look like? Our projects that were existing, that were in last year's budget, but that also continued into this year's budget, there's 24 currently underway, valued at a little over $48 million is the estimate. And then we added 20 new projects in 15-16, valued a little over $30 million, for a grand total of about $78.5 million. I know you guys see these comments kind of during the budget time, but we just wanted to remind, so what are the drivers of our capital program? And, our rate management methodology, the way we look at it is that smaller incremental adjustments are the best way to manage the utility and support our customers. And in doing so, we do the maintenance and repair work that should be done today to avoid the larger, more expensive work in the future. So these are the primary drivers of our capital program. As we all know, there's quite a bit of transmission work going on, which that totals about $24 million. Indiana Underground Cable was one that we talked about last budget a lot. That was actually approved in October, and is just now getting underway. And then on the Massengale automated controls, it's almost $5 million. We are currently writing the scope on that one to set out an RFP to get the ball rolling on that one. Just a couple of, let me back up actually. In that transmission related assets, the 23.7, you have 2 items on consent today that are part of that. So item 11, that is actually for work on the Co-op to Slayton substation, 115 kV transmission line rebuild. If you have technical questions, Steve can answer those. But we just wanted to give you an idea of kind of where in the city the work will be done. So that's item 11. And this is just zooming in a little bit, so you can see Slayton is the one in the south and Co-op a little bit further north and east. As far as item 12, this one is a capacity upgrade at Oliver substation. And you can see it, I don't know if you can see it very well, it's down in the very bottom south end of our map there. So overall, I've broken our capital program down into by functions and then cash for bond funding. So you can see there's a heavy focus in the transmission and distribution areas. About 50 million just in those 2 buckets. Another 17 million in distribution. Production has about 11. We have our vehicle replacement a little over 1 million. And then when it says admin, that is actually an older capital project for this building, a little under $1 million. So you can see that ties back out to the 78.4 million that I showed you earlier. And I just wanted to mention that we've changed the presentation in your board book. In terms of the capital program, we've given you a little bit more information, so the report is a little bit longer. So we show you on the first page, which I believe is page 27 of your 25, sorry, it goes 25 through 27. The first page is just the grand total by project, shows the appropriations, the expenditures, commitments, how much money's left. Page 26 shows you the bond funding of each of those projects and the commitments associated with that. And then page 27 is the same idea, but just the cash funding. And so if you're really interested, pages 26 and 27 add up to page 25. So,
I appreciate that.
for people like me, that matters. So that's all I had as far as the capital program. Be glad to answer any questions.
And one thing that Chad added this month was the commitments, because that hasn't been shown before. I mean, we've always shown you kind of historically what's been spent, but to date had not shown you what our future commitments have been, what the board has authorized, going forward. And so that kind of gives you a clearer picture of where we are. And I know, Greg, you've asked for that kind of information in the past, so hopefully that'll answer a lot of questions y'all might have had.
No, that's our budgeted capital expenditure.
Yes, sir.
I'm interested in it. Anyway, all right. Any questions for Mr. Slater? Anything else on that score?
That's all I'm good.
All right, guys, good job. I guess we'll go then to item 9. Consider, nominate, and elect officers of the Electric Utility Board. I say this is our annual, in December, we're slated to do this. And so I would open the floor for nominations of our board officers.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Dunn.
you nominate all serving officers in their current capacity to serve 1 more year.
Okay, so the motion would be to leave the officers and occupants as currently.
Right. Greg Taylor, the chairman. I don't know how to say his name, but Jerry Bell.
Mr. Bell.
Mr. Jerry Bell for vice chair and James Conrad for secretary.
Can I get a second before we discuss that? Second by Mr. Tucker. All right. Now, any discussion? Okay, that's probably not a motion we can discuss, but
And actually, Mr. Dunn placed that in the form of a nomination. So probably the thing to do would be to ask if there are any other nominations.
are there any other nominations? I appreciate that correction.
That is exactly.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, then we'll consider nominations closed, and we will vote on the motion that Mr. Dunn made. So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Thank all of you. Now then, we'll take up item 10, discuss, deliberate, and take minute action regarding the benefits of the Director of Electric Utilities and the General Counsel. This item includes basically extending 3 weeks of vacation to the Director of Utilities and the General Counsel. It includes no other modifications than that. Basically award that level of vacation beginning January 1st of 2015. And so I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
All right, got a motion and a second twice. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Very good. That would bring us then to the consent agenda, items 11 through 15. We'll see if anybody wants to pull any of those items for further discussion.
Other than pull, I make a motion that we accept this. Second.
Motion made and seconded to accept items 11 through 15 as listed. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. And all those covered. Any other business we need to attend to, Mr. Kadner?
No, sir.
Then we will be adjourned.